I'm Carey Stinson, and my journey through life has been quite an adventure. For over 20 years, I played Barney the Dinosaur on tour and 7 seasons of the hugely popular TV show Barney and Friends. Now my journey is to bring together friends and guests from all over the entertainment world for inspiring and at times amusing behind-the-scenes conversation. I'm Carey Stinson, and this is Purple Roads. Welcome to Purple Roads. My name is Carey Stinson, and as always, I'm thrilled you're here. This is such an exciting week. This is someone that the fans have been wanting on this show. I've been wanting to have him on this show, and this is so exciting. This is Charles Shaughnessy, who has had this unbelievable career, and he did this part, Dennis the Goldfish, on Stanley, that you all have talked about. He won a Daytime Emmy for this, and we're going to talk all about it. Charles, how are you?
Hi, Carey. I'm good. Hi, everyone. I am doing just fine. It's a beautiful sunny day here, and I've got a day off work, so I'm in a good place.
Because these days you're doing General Hospital?
Yeah. I started on General Hospital. When I first came out here in 1983, the first TV job, I did some stage, but the first TV job I did was a week on General Hospital. And then my career went all over the houses, or all around the houses. And now I'm back on GH, which is really fun.
Yeah, and I can't wait to talk about that, because I think it's one of the most interesting things about your career is that you have been all over the place, from soap operas to the stage, voiceovers. You've done a ton of recurring roles on different shows as well.
Yeah, it's like, you know, I constantly catch myself thinking about it and realizing how gosh darn lucky I've been, you know, more so than having some long career on like maybe 2 big series or something. To have done this kind of literally a patchwork, like a quilt of different jobs, has just been such a blessing. It's just, you know, because you're never bored. I'm just always doing something different. I think it's about being open to that. And I've always had, my philosophy has always been, when anything comes up, is there any good reason not to do it? And if there's no really good reason not to do it, then do it.
Well, and I've got to think that really builds your career, that it, as an actor, that really builds you up because you've done all these different things.
Yeah, I mean, I think it exposes you to always different demographics and different people, and it's different experiences. And I've always said acting for me is about supporting my life and lifestyle. I'm not one of these people who has ever said, if I can't act, I may as well not be here. It's like, that's all there is for me. Acting is, I've loved it, but it's a job, and I'm very lucky to love the job I do, but it's a job that supports myself and my family and the kind of life I want to live. So to have a job that takes you into all these different places and continues to support my lifestyle is just fabulous.
It's amazing. It's amazing, because I understand that aspect as well. I just recently got married, and I've got 2 teenagers, and so I understand that the balance of it.
That's what it's about. I mean, when it comes down to it, for me, and I'm sure for you, it's all about that. It's all about coming home at night or at the weekends, and having these people that you love more than life itself, and keeping them safe and happy and fed. That's what it's about. And if you can do that and enjoy it, you don't have to struggle down a coal mine. Boy, you wake up every morning and are just grateful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, starting at the beginning, you were in a family. Your parents were in the business. So were you kind of destined to be in this?
Well, I tried hard not to be. I loved acting as a kid. I was in all the school plays. Once I discovered it at the age of 5 in Peter Rabbit, I just loved being on stage. There was nothing, it wasn't TV or film, it was just stage. But my parents were in it. Then my brother became an actor. So I thought I better do something sensible. I went to Cambridge University and read law to be a lawyer, and then very quickly realized that was just not really in the cards. So I went back to what I knew I loved, and went back to drama school, and then met my future wife there, went to work on stage in England, came to America, and had a whole other career in America, starting out with stage again. I always kind of go back to stage as much as possible to sort of feed the battery, if you like. And things just sort of started happening.
Yeah, I want to talk about that with the stage, because I did 5 years on the road with Barney, and it was the most incredible experience. There's nothing like that interaction with your audience,
right?
That just absolutely fuels you, and you go out on that stage. It's amazing. It's absolutely
amazing
incredible.
Because, and I'll tell you why I think. So I've done some thinking. I actually wrote a piece about it, because there's a conspiracy between you on the stage and the audience out there, a suspension of disbelief. The obvious truth is there's an actor playing a part, and there's an audience who have come to sort of see this actor inside a costume or whatever it might be. But there's a suspension of disbelief, which says, no, we are as an audience, we're in this magical place where this whole other universe is taking place in front of us. And we believe everything we see. We're going to pretend that we believe profoundly what we're seeing. And if you do that in your head, it sort of kicks in, and you do. So you go to see a play, and you are literally sitting there watching a family, have a terrible fight, or you're watching someone scared of the guy breaking in, or whatever it might be. Or in this case, you see Barney, talking to you. And from the actor's point of view, you're part of that. So for that time, Carey disappears. You're Barney. And you are in this relationship with these people that's kind of magical, because it's really lives on a plane that is not reality. You're in this kind of space of meditation and really sort of spiritual. It's a kind of your ego and your consciousness goes away, and there's Barney the dinosaur. And it's same with me, playing a character on stage. You go away, Charles goes away, and I'm Richard III plotting murder. And I've got these co-conspirators that are the audience who are encouraging me or, frightened of me. And it's just magical.
I love that you say that, because that's exactly it. It's something that I learned. I started when I was 23 years old, doing performances as Barney, live performances before I did the tour. And I learned that Carey is gone. They came for their favorite purple dinosaur, and to be able to give that. And I loved, and I presume you too, when you go through a show and there's parts that the audience loves.
Right.
It was one of my favorite things, because I go, oh my God, this song's about to come up and they're going to go crazy for it, things of that nature. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's true. And if in that moment someone says, oh, Carey, it's time for, it's very disconcerting, because you're Barney, you're this purple dinosaur, and you're in relationship to the kids, and you're in that space, and someone comes and taps you on the shoulder and goes, oh, Carey, it's time for a break. And it's like, who?
It's very true. I'm curious, what did you do, and what do you do to get ready when you're doing a stage show? When you're getting ready to go out on stage, is there some way that you prepare?
Well, it's interesting. It's just as a sort of slight sidebar to that, because I was doing occasionally, every actor gets stage fright. And I had a terrible bout of it. I was doing a play, the Pasadena Playhouse. I was playing Laurence Olivier in a play called Orson's Shadow, which was based on a true event when Orson Welles directed Laurence Olivier in The Rhinoceros at the Royal Court. And I would get terrible stage fright for it. And it would sort of build during the afternoon and into the evening. And I'd be standing in the wings, waiting for my cue. And this panic would come up, and I would want to just pull the emergency cord and get out of there. And I realized that what it was a panic about this transition, about, as we say, Charles is in the wing. I've been Charles. And I knew that in a moment, I have to leave Charles behind and become Laurence Olivier. And there's this transition of almost feeling like Charles was going to have to die temporarily for me to move in. So I discovered that the more I gradually, during the last 2 hours, put on my costume, put on the makeup, started to adopt the voice and started to walk in a certain way and become mannered like Sir Lawrence. And as I started to do that and my body became comfortable and I walked into the wings as Laurence Olivier, so I kind of preempted it, things were much easier. I could then just be muttering to myself as my cue came and I'd sort of walk into the light, so to speak, and that transition happened. So for me, that's what I do to prepare is just try to jump into that character as much as possible before the actual moment arrives. Then you're kind of, that transition is easy, because that transition is a little terrifying. And the earlier you can get comfortable in a character, as we say, taking over your body, so Charles is left behind, the easier it is. So I discovered that that's what I need to do on stage. Film and TV is completely different. It's there is not that same moment of transition. I find it's not quite as magical as that. It's a whole different thing. It's great fun and I enjoy it, but it's just not quite the same. But that's what I always do on stage, is easing that transition, because I know that that moment is a pretty terrifying one.
It's fascinating. It's really interesting, because I ended up doing 12 years on Barney and Friends after doing all those years on the road, and it was needed for me. I started kind of losing myself a little bit, living on tour buses and all of those things, and so being able to have a home and go to a studio and have a little bit more of a regular schedule was important. But there was an aspect of that magic that was gone, because once the show starts, once a live show starts, it doesn't stop.
No,
it goes. That's it. If you trip, you make something of it and you go up and all those things, where you're doing 12 takes of a scene. Right. So unfortunately, we're working with kids, so there's a lot of that that's going on, and it was still an amazing experience. But it is kind of hard to explain that magic, of being on stage.
Right. It is. It's different. It's tiring. I mean, I've sort of now, I did something this summer. I did Spam-A-Lot in Ogunquit, Maine, which I'd done before. It's a great show. It's a bit too physical for me. I'm getting to the age now where a lot of that jumping around was getting harder. But I did, for the first time, find the 8 shows a week tiring. And I guess because TV is a bit less stressful in that way. There's less demand, because, as you say, you can stop and start. So I don't know where my relationship to stage is. It was interesting, because I've always loved it, and I suddenly kind of, I won't say I fell out of love with it, but I suddenly thought, this is getting to be a lot of work. So I don't know. We'll see. Maybe after a break and a nice 3-hander or something, I'll be up for it. But we'll see.
So what was it like leaving England and coming to America, taking that leap and coming into a totally different?
It was a leap of faith. I mean, the reason I came was this woman, this girl that I met at Central, who's from Studio City, California, who came out to train as an actress in London for 3 years, was in the year below me, and we started dating, and then she came back here to work, and I was still working at England. We kept in touch. I'd visit, she'd visit, and then after a while, I just said, you know what, this is crazy. I miss you, and I want you in my life. So I proposed, and she said yes, and I just packed everything up and left in April of 1983, and we got married in May of 1983 in Los Angeles. And I had come out here for her and for a life in America with the woman I loved. The work, I felt pretty confident that I would eventually start working, but that was not why I was here. And I think that gave me an advantage because a lot of actors, English actors at the time, were coming over for pilot season and then flying back to England. And it sort of, there was a certain desperation. It's like if you know you're going back in 5 weeks, it's like, got to make it happen.
Right.
And from the casting point of view, they were like, well, you know, what if you just disappear again? Whereas with me, I said, no, I'm not going anywhere. This is home. So they were able to relax and I was able to relax and eventually started working. So it was a roll of the dice. It was a huge culture shock. It's a very different country and a way of life.
Right.
But, you know, it was sunny and there were the sand and the beaches and the freshly squeezed orange juice and the palm trees every time you woke up. So, you know, what the heck? It was like, I always said, no matter how hard I was working, and I did all sorts of weird jobs at first. I was working in a textile firm. I was a private eye for a day. I was all sorts of things. But no matter how hard I worked, I always felt like I was on vacation because there were palm trees. And on Saturday, we just went down to the beach. So it was actually a lot easier than I thought. And I found myself occasionally going back to England in those early years and getting terribly homesick for Los Angeles almost immediately, which really surprised me. I had no idea that I was going to get homesick for Los Angeles. I thought maybe I'll get homesick about England, but no, that was done.
It's interesting. So in those early days, you're doing two different jobs. You're trying to make it.
Oh yeah, doing everything. Yeah.
When did it start turning? Where all of a sudden now acting looks like I'm going to make a living doing this.
Well, we had in the 80s, there was a lot of what was called like off Broadway. What was it called? Equity, non-equity or something. I can't remember what they called it, but it was like off Broadway. You weren't really paid anything. You'd maybe get paid your parking money. But it was experience, a way of getting experience and having people to see you. So I was doing all these weird and wonderful jobs. Susan and I both had these crazy jobs. She was working for a music manager. I was working at a textile company after all sorts of other things. But in the evenings, we were both doing Equity Waiver. That's what it's called, Equity Waiver. And one day I was doing this pretty dreadful show. It was a huge, long 4-hour revenge tragedy called the Spanish Tragedy, which was a sort of precursor to Shakespeare. God knows why anyone was doing it. It was like we had an audience of 2 every night, if that. People who just came in out of the cold, you know. But some casting directors from the Mark Taper came and saw it and liked me. And cut a long story short, 6 months later, they called up and said, we've got a play at the Mark Taper we'd like you to come in and see us for. And I got that. And it was a new Howard Brenton play. And because it was the big theater in town, I got an agent out of that. And then things started to happen. Then my agent was able to send me up for things. General Hospital came up. I went and worked at the Armanson and One More Stage thing with Alan Bates. And suddenly I was kind of on the radar as a young British actor in Los Angeles. And that's when things started to come together.
Well, and it's interesting because I think with your philosophy of trying to make a living for your family, probably easier for this next question, which is, you know, is it hard to go from stage and doing theater to doing a soap opera? But I'm guessing if your goal is to make a living, right?
Yeah, you just don't get the same money on stage. It's true. And again, you know, I hadn't got kids by then. The kids didn't come till my first girl was 1990. So it was fine. It's just me and Susan. So stage was fine. But in 1984, 85, Days of Our Lives came along, and it was meant to be just a 2 or 3 day job. And then it sort of stretched into 3 or 4 weeks, a month, very, you know, every now and again, not a lot, but a little paycheck every now and again. And then I remember it clear as day, the day my agent called and said, I think you and I think Susan should come too. We need to meet. Let's go and get a drink at the Cat and the Fiddle. I've got some news for you. So we went and met him, and he said, they want to put you on contract. This is what it means. More money than I'd ever seen before or thought of. And he said, now you do know a soap opera, it's a long commitment. And, some people have a bit of an agenda about doing soaps, blah, blah, blah. But on the other hand, this will give you some stability and some financial security. So, I said, yes, let's do it. And it turned into 8 years. And was just great because it gave me a good financial security, a base to work from. We were able to buy our first house. We were able to have our first child while I was on days, because it felt secure enough to do that. And then after 8 years, I left. I said, I've got to get out of here. Otherwise, I'm here for life. And much as I love doing it, I just felt I need to, as we were saying, see the rest of the world. So I left, and I had a year of doing not a lot, occasional couple of guest roles and things like that. And then The Nanny came up out of the blue, a pilot script. And that was the next 6 years that allowed us to have even more financial security. We had our second child and moved to a bigger house. So it was a very sort of clear, beautifully worked progress. As I say, I'm incredibly lucky it worked out like that. But yes, and then I was able to, because I was making good money, then I could go do theater. I went and did a new play at Williamstown Theatre Festival, which actually, by the time I decided my family should come too, and we rented a house for the summer, and it ended up costing me like $7,000 or $8,000 to do the play. Far from making money, it actually cost me money, but I was making money. So I was able to do this wonderful play, which was really exciting at Williamstown, and then go back to The Nanny, the next season. So it worked out really well.
Well, obviously we want to talk about The Nanny because that was a huge hit. When did you realize that we realized
it was like around the second season, may have been the third, second or third. We were in a sort of a fight with our rival time slot show, which was Coach. I can't remember which. I think it was ABC, and we were CBS. And Coach was always winning the time slot. We were second, I think. And one week, the headline on Variety was Nanny spanks Coach. And we had beaten them in the ratings. And we that was almost like that was the moment when we went, okay, here we go. And it was very exciting because it was a little show that no one thought was going to go anywhere. No one knew who Fran was. No one knew who I was. There were no big names. But the network, Jeff Sagansky, who was head of the network at the time, believed in it. And it was a really good show. I mean, we knew it was really well written and a really clever idea. And the audience found it in the summer reruns. They began to find it. And then they'd come back for the next season. So by season 3, we were off and running.
Well, obviously, I think a lot of it was the connection between the two of you, those characters. Was that something you guys hit from the beginning?
Yeah.
The rapport there from the beginning?
It's funny. The story is that Fran had not done very much. She had done Spinal Tap, and she had a show that didn't go anywhere called Princesses. And I had just done the soaps. That's all I had done was the soap opera. But for whatever reason, I found out my agent found out they really wanted me. It turned out it was the head of the network that really wanted me. But there's it's got to be a great feeling. Which is great, but I didn't know that for sure. My agents did. They weren't telling me that. All they said was, we're not going to let you audition for this, which is the big Hollywood game. Okay. Is, no, I'll take a meeting, but I won't audition because I'm far too important to audition. And I like auditioning because I like them to know what they're getting. Right. Like I like to know what I'm getting. Sure. So, but my agent was very insistent. No, we don't want to let you audition for this. We want to position you as more important than that. So I thought it was crazy because who am I? But anyway, so I was going to take a meeting, but at the same time, it was agreed that at the meeting, maybe we would read something together, because I wanted to know if it was going to work with Fran as much as they wanted to know. You know, you can't go into these things and have a surprise the first day of rehearsals.
Right.
So I took a meeting, just me with the producers and Fran, and we chatted and we seemed to like each other and get along. And then rather nervously, one of the producers said, well, you know, we've got some sides here. Would you feel comfortable maybe reading it? And I said, oh, absolutely, let's do it. So we sat on the couch and we read a scene, and it was kind of clear to everyone in the room that we had something going. You know, the difference between my very British energy and her Queen's energy was very funny before anyone said anything. And we were both good enough actors to know how to play off each other. And so I think when that meeting finished, we all knew that it was going to work. And then it was a case of just putting the pieces together and getting the studio on board, because the studio was made by TriStar, and they were like, wait a minute, you know, who is this guy? You know, we need one of them to be a bit of a star name. But luckily everyone said, no, it's Fran and Charlie. And then of course they put together this incredible cast. You then had Danny Davis and Laura Lane and Renee Taylor, and just this amazing supporting cast where all the chemistry worked. You know, the chemistry between Cece and Niles, the chemistry between Sylvia and Niles, the chemistry between Cece and Maxwell. I mean, everyone worked well together. You could put any two characters in a scene and there were sparks. So we knew it was a good formula, and then it was a case of the audience finding it. But yeah, it was right from the beginning, we knew we had a good show. Yeah, and
it's amazing how it took off
and lasted. What amazes me is yes, the taking off is great, but what amazes me is it's 30 years ago and still people are finding it. I hear from people who are finding it for the first time now, 30 years later, and going, oh my God, I've just seen this show called The Nanny and you're in it. And it's like, that was 30 years ago and it still works.
Well, I want to talk about that because with Barney, I learned fan base. They just absolutely love it. And you're on, I know that soap fans are huge. I know they love their soaps, and that's very important. And obviously with The Nanny, and then we're going to talk about this with Dennis the Goldfish as well. Because I can't even tell you how many requests I got for you to be on this show from Dennis the Goldfish.
Right.
And you've done all these other things. So
what
is it like for you understanding the responsibility to that fan base and to, yes, it's a job, and yes, I'm making money, but I'm also doing something that means a lot to a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, again, it's sort of, I think it goes back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, the magic of theater, because even though the making of a TV show is different from an actor's point of view, and it's not quite that magical connection, but once you've made it, the relationship between you on screen, which is no longer you, it's this avatar, and the audience watching it, once again, there's magic. Me, Charlie, is not involved in it, but Maxwell is. And Maxwell's relationship with the audience, or Shane's relationship, or the guy, Victor on GH, his relationship with the audience is that magic. They absolutely believe that Maxwell, this person I'm looking at, is in love with this woman and they're very funny, or this person is, you know, trying to rule the world and he has to be stopped. So I respect that. And people laugh about how soap fans in particular get you mixed up with your character, and they'll stop me in the street and go Shane, or they'll go, you know, Victor. And you have to go, no, I'm Charlie. And but I get it. I completely understand it, because from their point of view, that's the magical relationship, is between the character and you. So having created the character, you do have a responsibility to those fans. You can't just dismiss it and dismiss them, because that's really not fair. You've worked hard to create that relationship. You can't then go, oh, buzz off, right? You know, yeah. So I do respect it, because they are responsible for building it. They are the people that have made Barney a cultural phenomenon, or made Maxwell Sheffield a cultural phenomenon. And you and I are very privileged to have been part of that. But you can't dismiss the role that they play in making that happen. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. Barney does not happen in a vacuum any more than Maxwell happens in a vacuum. So, I've always been very respectful of the fans and very grateful through all the things I've done, and will always continue to do so. There are lines, if you're having dinner with your wife in a quiet restaurant, someone pulls up a chair and says, "Let me talk to you, Maxwell," then you have to say, "Excuse me, but this is not appropriate." But outside of that, if someone stops me somewhere and goes, "I'm so sorry, can I get an autograph?" or "Do you mind taking a picture?" as long as I'm not busy and doing something else, absolutely. Thank you.
Well, and you realize, what I started realizing at the beginning, for Barney, it was a show that gave moms a break sometimes. It brought the kids and the parents closer, and he's singing "I Love You, a kiss from me to you," and the kid kisses his parent. There's amazing connections in these things that I didn't think about. When I first got in this, I was looking for a job. I was looking for a job. And so then you start going, well, wait a minute. And as it goes and goes, it's an amazing experience.
And the pleasure, I mean, apart from the actual, it's teaching certain things and it's modeling certain behavior, there's just the joy it brings. I mean, I loved Barney because I just saw how much joy, pure joy, it brought to my kids. They just, we all sang the songs. They couldn't wait to see it. Every birthday party, it was Barney coming to the party. I mean, so just as a parent, to see your kids wide-eyed and excited and in love with this character and this world was just, it gives the parents a buzz too.
Well, it's perfect time to go into all of this, because we talked about Dennis the Goldfish, and I really want to get into that now. But you've also done several other, I don't want to say kids shows, but children's shows, several on Disney. What is that like for you? And what is that experience like? Because
I love it. I love doing stuff for kids because they're so, they're innocent. They're not as jaded. You don't have so many layers to get through to work that magic, that suspension of disbelief. They have a very vivid and working imagination right off the bat. So there's a sort of shortcut into those relationships. So I've always loved working with and for kids. I have to confess, I get a sort of slightly perverse pleasure from doing things that scare kids. Again, I think it's because there's something so sweet and vulnerable about being a vampire and seeing the kids come up to me and going, "Are you the vampire?" And I remember with my kids, they were always playing dress up and they would love to do the Wizard of Oz, and Jenny and her friend were doing the Wizard of Oz and playing all the parts. And they said, "Would you be the witch?" And so I became the Wicked Witch, and I scared the business out of them. And they would like burst into tears and run towards ran into their mummy's arms. And I just sat there trying not to giggle because it's so immediate, that kind of, there's something so wonderful about that such a profound suspension of disbelief that they can be scared by their own dad who's pretending to be a witch. So I've always loved that. I love working with kids and doing things. And Dennis was the perfect example. I mean, it was such an interesting character, this very smart, worldly goldfish.
So let's talk more about Dennis and that show, because like I said, it really affected people. People love that character. And to me, it's such a fine balance when it gets into children's entertainment, when you're dealing with the fact of being educational, but also the entertainment side of it, right? If you're just educational, it's not going to work, right? You have to have that balance. And I thought, I was actually going back and watching some of Dennis this morning, and it's such a balance to it because he's teaching a lot. He's also kind of the mentor to Stanley, but he's also having fun. And then,
Right.
it's out. I was watching the one with crocodiles, and it's out, the fantasy and the imagination. So there's a
Right.
lot going on with that.
There's a lot. It was a very, audiences, people always talk about, lowest common denominator and, the audiences nowadays are not very smart, but that's not true. You give them a smart show and they absolutely get it. And Stanley was a very smart show because it worked on these three levels. There was always the introduction to the show was Stanley's having a problem at school, or he's having a problem with his parents. There's some issue about bullying or about honesty or something like that. And Dennis, in the Great Book of Everything, would always find an animal, something in the animal kingdom that mirrored the issues, whether it was about being something small, but it makes itself big, whether in the presence of a predator, which would be about standing up to bullies, or there's always something. So you'd learn about human behavior and how to socialize at school, and then you'd learn a bit about the animals and actually have a natural history lesson. And then thirdly, as you say, just pure entertainment because they were funny and having fun and on adventures and singing silly songs. So packed into this little 20-minute segment was a wealth of entertainment, education, and fun. So yeah, I was very aware at the time, again, like the Nanny, that this was a really good show, that I didn't know if people were going to find it and respond to it, but it was as good a show as they're going to get out there. So when people did find it, and it was a huge hit on Playhouse Disney, it was very rewarding.
Is there a different mentality that goes in when your audience is completely different? You're doing this for kids compared to...
No, I don't. Not for me. No, not at all. No, not at all. Because I'm very aware that as an actor, that's all I am, is a big kid. We're just playing dress up.
Right.
I mean, my youngest daughter has an incredible imagination. She's not an actress, thank goodness, but I think probably could have been, because when she was a kid, she and her best friend, Emily, would spend all day putting on different clothes and acting out really complex, involved scenarios about being, one person's a sort of upper class shopper going around a shop in Beverly Hills, and the other one's the shop assistant who's trying to deal with this rather diva personality, or one's a teacher and the child is having trouble at school, or one really different things, and just so real and so committed. And that's all. They were actors, and I watched them doing it and going, they're doing nothing different from what I do as a living, which is being a kid, getting in touch with your emotions and your imagination and putting on clothes and doing it. So when I'm doing a job as an actor, there's no different approach between an adult audience or a child audience. It's exactly the same make-believe and conspiracy between the two of us.
That's interesting. And when you're doing when they come, you get a role like this. I mean, I guess because you've done this so much, when you hear you're going to be the voicing a goldfish, does that excite you? Because there's so many places you can go. Do you have?
Yeah. I mean, I remember that audition coming in. As a voice actor, you're getting all these. I do thousands, and I book like one every 10 years. And I remember this coming in, and it was the voice of a goldfish. And so it said, it gave like 10 different actors, like think, Patrick Stewart, Michael Caine, Al Pacino, like what? And it said the goldfish is indeterminate age, indeterminate gender, go. So you've got a carte blanche, what a goldfish sounds like. So I just had this idea in my head of a particular actor that I came to mind. And so I sort of did as much of a sort of imitation of him as I could, and just said, okay, this is my idea of what this goldfish sounds like. And it could have been a bazillion things. I could have done a bazillion different things. It just so happened that what I choose to put on tape, someone somewhere listened to it and went, oh, that's a goldfish. And the rest is history. So yeah, it was a complete shot in the dark. And it just so happened that we all agreed that this was what a goldfish, what Dennis would sound like. And then the rest of it was just so much fun. I absolutely got to love this guy. I knew who he was. Again, it's like we're talking about acting. I knew who this character was, and I would enjoy walking into the studio, and in my head, I was this goldfish, who had a lot of information to impart and was rather excited to impart it, and a little bit pedantic at times, and it was just fun.
And when you're doing this, are you seeing any of the animation, or are they just recording you and then matching it up later?
They had they'd occasionally have little sketches, as I remember.
Okay.
They had a sort of sketch, so you kind of had a look at it, which is incredibly useful to me. I find when I get a voice audition and there's no sketch, it's really hard. But if there's a sketch, you can sort of see what they're getting at. For the audition, there wasn't a sketch. But once I did it, between my voice and their ideas, they then sketched in Dennis. And once I saw him, I knew who this was. And so every now and again, they would have something, a particular cell of it or something. But mainly we were doing it, and they were then drawing it. It was going off to wherever it went, to Korea or somewhere, to draw it, to animate it. So there wasn't a lot of visual guidelines. We kind of set the pace in the studio.
And going on a little further, when you're getting this character like this, or any of these characters that you get, deciding if you're going to use your voice or an accent, or how far you're going to go with that, and how quick can you decide? I mean, you take time to think about this, what I'm going to do this, for example, with a goldfish, or it just come out?
It's sort of, you play around a little bit. As I say, if there's a picture, it's really much easier to do it. And then I play it back, looking at the picture and go, is this what he sounds like? And if in the picture, there's certain physical things about it, like maybe there's an age or a sort of way the mouth is shaped, it can help, figure it out. Do they have a lisp? Do they, is there an accent? Is it a whispery voice? And then you make that decision, and then you kind of make it real, make it become the person or the character. And it doesn't take, there's no point for me, there's no point spending too much time on it, because it's a complete roll of the dice. Right. But once I'm satisfied that it's real, that it's not a sort of cartoon voice, then, you just go for it. And then the more you do it, the more real it becomes. And then on Stanley, they would then give Dennis different situations, different emotional situations, which was great, because now you're actually bringing the voice and the character into different emotional situations to see how that voice and that character works in those situations. And it sort of grows the character. And I remember the episode that actually got the Emmy was one where he's leaving. He thinks that Stanley doesn't love him anymore, and he packs his bags and he does this Elton John song where he's leaving, and he's very emotional and very sad. And it was so much fun, because I got to be Dennis, who's usually very on top of things, sort of slightly shattered and singing. So it was very exciting to bring all that work and sort of develop this emotional life for him. Was great.
What is the experience like from getting that script, auditioning for it, doing the show, and then winning an Emmy for the show?
I mean, really, of all the stuff that I've done, the thing I get the Emmy for is Dennis. God bless him. And it was shocking. I mean, it was genuinely. They always have the speech. I'm so surprised. I wasn't expecting this. Well, I really wasn't. I did have a little something written, luckily, but it was really a shock. And really rewarding, because you put in all the work, you're kind of pleased with what you've done. And it's very rewarding to have that recognized. So it was thrilling. It really was. And came out of the blue. And I owed a lot of that to the writers and the animators because that's the weird thing about animation is, again, in the speech, everyone says, it's not just me, it's all the cinematographers and the director and the this, but in animation, it really is you and the animators. Yes, the script writers as well, but you and the animators are basically, it's like with Barney, it's the person in the costume, and it's the voice, and it's the designer of Barney. I mean, those three things are so interrelated that you can't separate them. And it's the same with animation. You really can't separate the voice from what they're seeing. So I knew they had done a great job, and I was very grateful to them. But so I really did feel like we should be sharing this. But it was very exciting.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because a lot of people don't understand that. Yeah, for me, it was that. I have a voice actor as well. And so you're like one.
Right.
For it to work, you're like one.
You're really one. And it's more true in that than any other medium. So they all have their special quirks. And that's certainly in animation. That's certainly one that, you're really one person.
We get a lot of people that watch this show that want to be actors and performers and puppeteers and voiceover actors and all of that. And I think it's interesting, as you were just mentioning, about how many times you audition for voiceover roles and you get them here and there. I guess one, and I've gone through this, so I understand, the word no, or a lot of times you don't even get no, right? They just, you never hear.
That's it. Most of the time, you never hear anything.
But making that decision, right? You look at that script and you decide, I'm going to go with this voice and I'm going to take it this way. And if it doesn't work out well, I did that. What is that for you?
For me, people say, oh, there's so much rejection. It's such a tough business and that. I have never taken it personally. It's weird. I don't know why. It's never bothered me. It bothers me when you don't hear, when you've done a really good audition, you put it out there and no one has the courtesy to say no. That annoys me. Because like with Dennis, for instance, I did the audition and it was months. I mean, literally, I had completely forgotten about it. I was doing another job. I was doing a movie in Kansas, and I got a phone call and they said, you booked the Dennis the Goldfish. And I went, what? I don't even remember what that was, and they had to play me a tape to remind me what it sounded like. And I just sort of thought, oh, they were just being rude and weren't going to get back. So it's always annoying that, because you can't quite let go of it. Right. Because it might 3 months later suddenly come up. But I never feel a personal rejection. It never hurts me personally. It's just I'm very aware that there's a bazillion ways that they could go. There's 100 different ways that the character could be played, and they just thought someone else's was more appropriate. Fine, doesn't worry me. But yeah, you can put down, I mean, literally the number of voiceovers, particularly, that I have thrown out into the ether. I mean, my success rate must be something like 0.002, I mean, it's like the percentage.
But the 0.2 got you an Emmy.
Exactly. That's what's so crazy about it. I mean, it's nuts. I mean, literally, I think that's that and about 2 other shows, maybe 3 or 4 I've done animated. But a tiny percentage of the auditions, and one of them's an Emmy, go figure. How
have you been able to, because you've done several roles that you're well known for. Obviously, the Nanny.
Right.
We're talking about the Goldfish here. Obviously, what you've done on the soaps. How are you? Because I know you've done a lot of shows as a guest actor on. You've done a lot of those things. How are you able so that when the audience sees it, they don't think, oh, it's from the Nanny or from the Goldfish?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a very good point, because for a long time after the Nanny, it was very hard to get work and I think it was probably for that reason. And interestingly enough, you know, I haven't had any success in the commercial world doing TV commercials. And I think that's the problem. I think that I'm not so well known that I can go, hi, I'm Charles Shaughnessy, and you should buy, you know, this insurance policy. But I'm too well known to be Mr. Everyman. So that if there's a dad and his kids playing at the beach, someone's going to go, wait a minute, isn't that Mr. Sheffield? You know, so there is a problem with being well known for something and then trying to do a guest spot as someone completely different. And for a long time, I believe it was an issue. And then I change, you know, and time goes by and, you know, you can be seen as something else. And then if you're lucky, you get a role that is very different. Like Mr. Sheffield was entirely different from Shane Donovan. So for 8 years, I was Shane Donovan, and then suddenly I was Mr. Sheffield. And then I did, after a long time, but I got to do a character 5 episodes of Mad Men as St. John Powell, who comes in and buys the company, which again was a completely different character. And a lot of people who watched Mad Men religiously, to them, I was St. John Powell. So there's always been that challenge of creating another character that you get identified for. I'm at the process of that now on General Hospital. I'm playing Victor Cassadine, this sort of evil head of the bad family who's been killed like 5 times and come back from the dead. And this time he came back from the dead as me. But again, it's like a whole other character. And at the beginning, people were writing and going, to me, he's always going to be Shane, you know, or, you know, oh, it's Mr. Sheffield on General Hospital. And gradually that's got less and less. That noise has lessened. And people are like, no, that's Victor Cassadine now. So it's very gratifying to sort of be able to shed one skin and put the other one on and have people accept it. But it's not easy. It takes time and patience, because going back to what we're saying, this is the theme of our conversation. The magic that you've created with the audience, this suspension of disbelief, is so important and so real. They feel a slight betrayal if suddenly you're not that person anymore. It's a bit like you've dumped them to someone else, but then they kind of, you allow them to fall in love with the new boyfriend, you know. But there's a moment of betrayal, you know, when suddenly their beloved Shane Donovan is being funny with Fran Drescher. It's like, where does that come from? Right. Or being St. John Powell, or being, you know, evil as Victor Cassadine. So it's, again, part of the fascination of our business, you know, which is this you know, creation of magical creatures.
Is it, so we'll talk about Victor here for a second. Okay, so you start doing it, but as you continue and you start really getting into the character, and I'm guessing that's part of it, right? As you get to know it, you know, obviously when I first got it, became Barney, to after I had been doing it for all those years, it's a completely different, you really understand the character and the audience, right, all of that. So
absolutely.
As you really get to know that character,
you get to know the character. And sometimes a new writer will come on the show, or a new director will come on the show and say, you know, and then you do this, you move over there and you do this. And you know better than anyone, no, I can't. Barney. And sometimes people go, oh, you're being such a diva. You know, what are you talking about? You know, you're a purple dinosaur. You don't know what a purple. You go, no, I do. I know Barney would not do that. This is not in his being. He can do this, but he can't do that. And sometimes they'll push back, and sometimes you have to dig your feet in and go, no, the actor, for that moment, if you make me do this, for that little moment, I'm breaking the magic because I'm no longer believing I'm the dinosaur because I know I wouldn't be doing it. So I'll do it if you want, but I'm telling you, you're breaking this bond of trust with the audience because they know, and I know I wouldn't be doing it. So as you're developing a character, and on GH, they're great because they listen and they watch, they see what you're doing, and they get really in tune with what you're developing. And they're very easy. If I say I wouldn't do this, they're like, okay, fine, whatever you think, you tell us. So there's a great deal of trust. But it's true, as you develop the character with the writers and with the directors, and sometimes they're right. Sometimes they say, well, try it. And you try and you go, oh, you know what? I get it. I see what you mean. Yes, that works. And out of that, you build a more and more real, more and more flesh and blood character.
It's funny because I did run into some of that, what you're talking about. And one of the hard parts we had is that the songs were so beloved. But when you've done it, 10,000 times, there's a new director, someone comes in and says, let's give that song a break. And it's like, we can't.
Right.
We can do a different version of it. And that's what ended up happening, right? You do a different style of music to that song or a different dance step or something like that. But you have got to always remember your audience.
Right. You got to remember the audience, and you got to remember who the characters, like, you established Barney and how he dances, for instance. And he has those sort of certain movements. And I remember Barney would do twirls occasionally, but they were it was obviously limited by the costume, but there was also, he's a dinosaur, he's big, he's like, there's a certain kind of weight involved. And if a director had said, listen, this is all getting a bit old fashioned, we want to sort of jazz it up and have Barney do a kind of urban dance, you would say, if I'm going to do it, he's going to do it badly. It's going to be funny because he's going to fall over. No, because the kids love it. And I think he should be really good at it. And you go, no, that's crazy. Barney cannot do the frog well, whatever it might be. It's just not going to work. He can do it badly because he's trying and it's a joke and they all end up on the floor laughing. But don't ask me to do something that just because you think it needs to be updated completely goes against what we've established this character as.
That's so funny because I learned that, and I think I learned it from doing the stage show for so long, because that's where you're really in tune with your audience, the songs that they love and the things of that nature. So I want to wrap up with what's next. Obviously you're going to be with G&H for a while.
But yeah, you know what? Who knows? I mean, this is the great thing about this business, as I mean, people say, what role would you like to do? Or what would you like to be doing next? Or what is next? The joy of it is I have no idea. I mean, if you had told me at the beginning of my career, any one of the different moves that have come from doing a soap opera to doing a sitcom to doing a beloved cartoon fish, any of it, I'd have said you're crazy. So I've learned not to predict, not to expect, but to enjoy whatever comes down the pipe,
Well, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Likewise, always, it's been a real pleasure, Carey. And it's such a pleasure to meet you and talk with you. You, as I say, you've been a part of our lives in this household for a long time. I mean, my kids still, talk lovingly about Barney.
Well, I watched the Nanny. I've seen you many times and all the different things you've done. And I'm very impressed because being in this industry, I know how difficult it is to have a career that you've had and as diverse a career as you've had. And hearing these stories behind it's just been a joy.
Likewise, great fun. It's been a really fun morning. The time has flown by.
Well, thank you so much for joining me.
All right, you take care. Bye now.
Bye. And thank you for watching Purple Roads. Remember to keep your eyes, ears, and your heart open, and you'll find your purple road. We'll see you next week.